town, but there are small businesses that do perfectly well for themselves, selling goods and services to customers that like what they do and like what they offer. And it provides a healthy, stable living for them. And you as an artist can have a similar sort of phenomenon. It's hilarious to even call it that in your music career. You don't have to be a massive superstar to survive.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Indepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. This is episode 289. So excited to be here with you today to share some music marketing truths and a lie. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me, as always, is your other host, Circa. Cirque, what's up, dude? Are you ready to spit some truth?
I'm super pumped, dude. Yes.
We're going to break a lie.
Yeah. Let's break the lies.
I think it's time. This is going to be a fun episode. Cirque and I were talking earlier today, actually, when we came up with the topic of this episode, and we wanted to share two truths that we've come to believe through our experiences working with artists, bands, clients at our agency, IndieX, and a lie that is perpetuated throughout the music business about digital marketing and your music and what you can, should, and shouldn't do with it. And so we're going to talk about these and we're going to discuss them and kind of share with you guys some of our experiences and the things that we see going on day to day across the music business with a lot of the artists that we work with, and hopefully give you guys some insights and things to think about when it comes to marketing your own music, building your audiences, and growing a career. I'm excited.
I'm psyched, dude. Let's get it. Let's crack into this list.
All right, the first one that we want to break into, and this is something that I think we started experiencing very early on when working at IndieX. IndieX has been an agency for over 5 years now, which is a really cool milestone. We've gotten to work on a lot of cool projects with a lot of different types of artists, a lot of different bands, even some projects outside of the general scope of music, which has been really cool. And we've learned a lot in the process of doing that. We've gotten to work with artists of all shapes and sizes and styles. And it's been, I would say, as a marketer and a business owner, it's been exciting. It's been educating. It's forced me to think on my feet in a lot of ways. And Cirque, maybe you would agree. We've kind of had our brains stretched in a million and one different ways.
Yeah, for sure. There's running an agency and then there's running an agency. So you've got, issues with like growing the business and the value proposition and finding clients and pleasing them. And then you've got all the issues in how do I maximize impact for a client? And so definitely had to adapt rapidly and frequently.
I think this first truth that we're going to share here is an important one, especially right now, because I think generally speaking, it's easy for us to get head down in the work that we do and not necessarily be observing what's going on out in the wild. But I think that this is a truth that isn't observed all the time and really should be. It should be paid attention to. And that's that as an artist, as a band, when you're running a creative career, once you get to a certain size where you've got a level of attention and some ability to communicate with fans, one-to-one sort of fashion, you have to make a pivot to focusing your marketing on revenue generating activities that seek to get you some kind of return on your investment. Might not be a total return on your investment, but no matter how small, there's at some point at this juncture in your music career and in your marketing specifically, you have to turn the page into focusing in on revenue generating activities, things like building sales funnels, things like running sales promotions, getting your e-commerce in shape, and really working on that. And it's very, very tempting to stay in the I'm just going to release music and hope to use my marketing to get it in front of more people and really do nothing more than that. And that's a trap that a lot of artists fall into. We learned this when, frankly, a number of artists would come to us and say, hey, I just want you to help me run ads to, grow my Spotify, help me run ads to grow more awareness. And it's like, well, you're at a place where the thing that you need to really start focusing on is starting to make some money and monetizing the audience that you have. And while hiring an agency may or may not be the right thing for you to do at this juncture, it is the thing that you need to focus on. And that's a really hard place to be in my opinion, because when a lot of artists are there, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're in a place to hire out to do it. And that's why I wanted to bring this truth to the episode, because I think it's an interesting one and it's a unique place for artists to be in.
Yeah. So a couple of caveats here. So let's run through them. One is, it is the case that your music career needs to generate revenue. I think we all agree about that, right? No one's thinking it does. I mean, unless it's a hobby, in which case, like, and we say this all the time, like, that's fine. If you need your music career to be your full-time living income and you need to be able to do it 24/7 as a job, then it needs to generate revenue. So that's caveat number one. Caveat number two is we're in our own little bubble here where it's like we know how to monetize artists by generating sales. But in the music industry, that has never, ever been thought about or even really focused on. Like there's a few cases, like a great example and an uncommon one that I love to use because people are like, really? Is Insane Clown Posse, who long before they ever had a record deal was generating income with merchandise. And if you go to like their store, what's their record company?
This is a family favorite amongst the Indepreneur team to talk about.
Yeah, Psychopathic Records. That's the name of the record company. If you go to their store, the amount of different variants of clothing they have and have ever put out is just insane. It's nuts. And it speaks to that they very early on, knowing that it would be difficult for them to get significant advances and industry attention, they monetize through direct to customer. But it is the case that like in the music industry, everyone is trying to avoid making sales. I think we talked about this on a recent podcast episode where like music industry very much fancies itself B2B, business to business, and is always trying to pass the buck. So you as an artist, you don't want to sell to customers, so you pass the buck to a manager. And then your manager doesn't want to have to do all that, so they pass the buck to a record label, a booking agent, and a publisher and a distributor. And then they don't want to do all that, so they pass the buck to agencies. See how this is, you know? It all ends up in our hands. And so eventually someone's going to have to sell something, okay? And the only way you're not going to have to, the only other revenue that's going to come in is from sync licensing and then streaming checks. That's it. And then like booking fees. That's the only revenue that can come in without an actual sale being generated. And booking fees aren't going to come in unless you're selling tickets. So someone's got to sell tickets to a customer. So eventually like you start to realize that, oh, this whole industry is propped up on the idea that like we can just avoid selling and we're just too cool for school and never have to sell anything, when in reality, like it's going to die unless someone does that. And usually it's like a partner. And by the time it gets to them, because so many people have passed the buck, there isn't much of a buck left. Okay. The record label's taking a slice, manager's taking a slice, and then the person who finally sells is taking a slice. So that does happen. And so, you know, if you're not familiar with our world, you might be inclined to think, well, like, I don't ever have to sell e-commerce products. What do you mean? Because I'm going to get an advance from a record label, and then I'm going to have all these opportunities. I'm going to be on shows. I'm going to be on a tour. I'm going to get big checks, not a sales margin, right? And so we are in our own little world in the sense that, like, we believe that the people who get those big checks are freaks of nature. If you take the total amount of people who tried to do that, and then what percentage of that succeeded and got the big checks and now they live off that, it's almost none of them.
Yeah.
It's almost none of them. Yeah. That's how small it is. So we think that if you can take the initiative and say, I'm going to sell, then you can get there a lot faster to a career that actually, and with a higher degree of likelihood. More people end up making a living trying to sell products directly to their fans than end up making a living trying to get advances in big checks.
This is akin to, to take it down to a very, very local level. This is akin to running a small business. I mean, duh, we say that all the time on this show, but I want to paint a picture here of like, there are small businesses in your town. Maybe you don't live in a big city. Maybe you don't even live in a very heavily populated town, but there are small businesses that do perfectly well for themselves, selling goods and services to customers that like what they do and like what they offer. And it provides a healthy, stable living for them. And you as an artist can have a similar sort of phenomenon. It's hilarious to even call it that in your music career. You don't have to be a massive superstar to survive. And that's, kind of underlying the point that you mentioned, Cirque, about like, what's the 1% that are the superstar monsters versus the artists that are trying to make it out there. You shouldn't have to be a superstar. That's why I wanted to bring this truth to the table today, was like, at a certain point when you've garnered attention where you are in a place where you can start making offers and start monetizing the attention that you've gotten, even if it doesn't seem enormous or like you're famous, you have to start positioning your marketing in that direction, even though it's tempting to just keep following everything else that you see out there. Because at a certain point, you're not going to be able to, steer yourself back. You're going to just continue to spend money. And we'll get into that in a little bit here because there's more on that. But I wanted to paint the picture of like, you don't have to be much different than the mom and pop shop that, maybe it's not even $1 million business, but there's a, a store, a restaurant, whatever, picture a business that's down the street from you that's providing a healthy living for a business owner and their family. That could be you,
Yeah, it speaks to this idea of a middle class in the music industry. It's currently non-existent. It's kind of the main problem we work on at Entrepreneur is like, can we at least pad out between the ultra rich and the institutionally impoverished? Can we at least fill in some of that gap? So Ruslan is an artist and was on the No Labels Necessary podcast. Shout out to Brandman Sean and Corey. Great episode where he talked about this middle class. He's like, look, I'm not huge. Like a lot of my peers in the music industry are a lot bigger than me, but I make a healthy, quiet, middle class income.
Yeah. Love that.
And that's kind of what we're talking about. And so like, I think the truth here is because we talked about how when is the right time to actually pivot to selling and trying to generate revenue. And it's like, you cannot not yet be an artist. And I think today in the modern era, that's denoted by the release of music on a frequent basis and the release of content to support that music on a frequent basis.
Right.
And so if you're not putting out content regularly and music regularly that's getting an audience, it's really worth it to spend the time to dial that in. And we've talked about that ad nauseum on this podcast over the last few episodes. So I won't rehash it. But once you're there, then you have good content and good music that you're putting out regularly. And now you need to grow the audience. And so you might think, shouldn't I focus on growing the fan base before I try to sell something? And the truth is that businesses that can sell a product grow faster, right? Businesses that have a sales process dialed in, what they can do is they can get as much exposure as they want, knowing that this system they've built actually brings in enough revenue to pay for the exposure. So you can grow your fan base far faster with almost an unlimited budget if you have a sales process that gets enough sales to pay for whatever the ad spend is that generated those sales. And so that's exposure from a paid traffic or an ad platform. And it's a valid way to get new fans. We know that. And it's a valid way to sell products. And if you can do both, then you're unlimited. So your ability to spend forever without making any sales is limited. There's a ceiling to how much you can spend per month on direct to Spotify ads, for instance. But if you are selling a product on the other end of your advertising, you can expose your content to millions without paying for it. So the right time to sell is as soon as you possibly can. Are you putting out content and music regularly? Do you have an intention in doing it such that the content's getting better and the reach is getting better? Okay, once you're there, it almost immediately makes sense to be able to sell something, because if you can do that, then you can grow without limit.
Yeah, it's so true. And I mean, like, I've seen this play out in, artists that would probably be categorized in like the middle class that we're sort of talking about here, that some of the first products that they were selling were leaning more on services than they were on products, which was very interesting. But even early on at IndieX, this was something that we were seeing 5 years ago, was artists selling things that made them feel or allowed them to be more intimately connected with the small core fans that they did have. And that's why, when bringing this up, talking about like, if you've got some attention and if you've got, the releasing of music and the releasing of content that is quality under your belt, and you've got some, direct kind of one-to-one conversations able to be had, then selling things, just to, pull some easy examples, selling things like custom songs, selling things like house concerts or personal performances, that can be a really intimate sort of step into this monetization direction that can actually be really, really lucrative for you. It allows you to even skip some of the lower ticket stuff and go right to mid or even high ticket. And I've seen artists do it. It's not outside of the realm of possibility. You just have to be willing to, and maybe get a little bit creative about how you package offers. I've seen tons of artists do that.
Didn't we have, I forget if he was an IndieX client, but wasn't there a kid named Jordan?
Yeah, Jordan Skinner.
Jordan Skinner.
He was a very early IndieX client. He was an OG indie inside of Indie. This might have even been before Indie Pro was a thing, which is wild to think about. But yeah, he was a very early IndieX client, and he had sold, maybe some physical product, some CDs, some T-shirts, did an album launch or an EP launch digitally, but he was making money doing house concerts around the world, which was crazy. He was in Australia, I believe, and he was going over to Europe and the UK doing house shows and selling tickets.
And he booked them all with an online funnel.
Yeah, he was booking them through an online funnel. It was great. It was an amazing thing to see so early on. That was actually one of the stories that I was thinking of when this topic sort of popped into my head.
Yeah, it's like most businesses, it's not a good thing long term, but they'll do whatever. Like, for instance, like IndieX, over time, our acceptance rate for applications to IndieX has gone down because ultimately we're trying to work with the people we can help the most. And so we really narrowed our scope and fine-tuned it to just be able to deliver results at a massive scale. But that involves saying no sometimes. And so that kind of choosiness comes with maturity in a business. But when you're starting out, it's like, whatever I can get, like, let's do it. And so as an artist starting out monetizing, it can literally be anything.
I've wrestled with so many clients on this point too, about like, oh, but like, what if in 2 years that's not scalable for us anymore? It's like, it doesn't matter if it's scalable in 2 years. Get your money now.
Yeah. It's like businesses go from frequently needing cash injections, which is campaigns that pull sales forward or maybe have you fulfilling a service you wouldn't want to fulfill long-term at scale, but just doing it to get the capital necessary to continue. And so, one-off services, thinking of unique offers, like these are all great ways to monetize that you don't need ad traffic in a sales funnel necessarily to do. You could sell it one-to-one on DMs,
or in live streams. I've seen artists and bands sell really unique offers to their fans on live streams that they do that are free, that just happen to be captivating people in the moment to want to jump.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to skin that cat. But I think the point we're making here is that probably the worst thing you can do for yourself financially is to avoid selling anything to anyone for all time, because you're highly likely to fail. And if you do get to that point, there's going to be so many hands in your pocket that you're going to make almost nothing compared to the whole pie.
The earlier you can do it, the better.
It's not even worth mentioning how many hands will be in your pie, because the most likely thing is that there will be no pie. Just the crushing majority of cases, that's what's going to happen.
It's true. Yeah, it's so true.
So if you can start baking your own pies as quickly as possible, you're going to have less hands in your pocket. You're going to be able to grow faster because you have capital coming in. You're going to be able to sell, and you're not going to feel... One of the biggest hurdles to get over in selling is just believing that you can sell.
Yeah.
Like the belief that this is possible and okay to do is what's holding most people back. And so if you can just get over that as early as possible when the stakes are lowest, that's best. So I'm not saying I'm going to put my first single out. What should I sell? Don't do that. But if you're at a place where you have a body of work, you're releasing music consistently and you're releasing content consistently, and there's an audience for it now, you need to start transitioning into sales and revenue generation pretty immediately, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And just to kind of close out this truth, like we kind of mentioned at the beginning, is the point here is not that you're going to start moving in that direction with your music marketing and expect to be making tons of money right out the gate. That very likely won't be the case. But you're moving towards revenue generating activities. You're moving towards marketing that pays for itself. You're moving towards profitability in the company. Is it going to happen right away? Maybe, maybe not. And that's okay. But at least you're moving in that direction.
Yeah. Before you're making 100K a month, you need to make 50K a month. And before that, you need to make 10K. And before that, you need to make 1K. And before that, you need to make $100 a month.
Right. Exactly.
That's just the facts.
The next truth kind of stumbles from this first one that we talked about. And we started kind of teasing this. And we talked about this a couple episodes ago when we were discussing the Billboard Hot 100 charts and the data that we found by studying it. We'll link to that in the show notes in case you guys haven't heard that episode. But this truth is something that we intuitively knew when we really started IndieX, but the more that we worked with clients and worked with different kinds of clients, we really saw how true this was. And that is that e-commerce is the most undervalued channel for revenue generation in the music industry for marketing, period.
Yeah, I would say so. And really what it is like, it's not that like people couldn't know this. Like, it's not like we're geniuses and we figured out something that other people couldn't figure out.
No, by no means. I am definitely not a genius.
Yeah. I think it's just like a matter of priorities and parties. I could explain it. It would take 3 hours to fully get out all my thoughts on it. But just if you go back to the like 1930s and run the tape forward on the music industry and all the history of it, it is complete chance that it ended up like this almost. But ultimately, like influencers in the creator economy show that, which is going to be $500 billion. By 2027, they estimate that the creator economy will be $500 billion in annual revenue receipts. So that's 500 billion. That's 20 global recorded music industries combined.
It's wild.
Yeah. And so what they're doing is they are monetizing fandom. They're monetizing attention at scale. And they're not doing it with like, go stream my music or buy a concert ticket once a year. It's not enough revenue. And they have a captive audience. And so they're going to monetize it with the highest margin opportunity that they can find. And when it comes to artists, especially artists with a large following, they are literally leaving so much money on the table by not doing this. And it's because they don't think it's important, because the industry has conditioned them to not think it's important.
Yeah.
So it's not like they couldn't figure it out if they thought about it really hard, or they don't have all the prerequisite knowledge. It's just that it's not even a focus in the music industry. And to some degree, like they doubt that there's even, until you sell something, it's easy to get the impression that no one will ever buy it. It's easy to get that impression. And we've talked to artist managers, we've talked to record label executives, we've talked to all sorts of people high up in the industry who genuinely don't presume that their massive fan base for their artists will want to buy e-commerce products or want to buy merch. It's very common. That's probably where it comes in, is that like, it's actually a lack of belief.
Lack of belief. Yeah. I was just going to say.
It's a lack of belief. It's a limiting belief.
Yeah, truly. And that's truly all it is, because like you said, Sir, like we weren't geniuses in figuring this out. By no means. Like, e-commerce has been a thing since pretty much the dawn of the internet, you know, like as soon as people could sell online, they started selling online. And this doesn't just apply to artists. Obviously, artists were probably late to the game, like everything else. But it's true, like not a genius moment to figure this out. And in a lot of ways, like we sort of stumbled our way into believing it too. In a lot of ways, you know, throughout, I would say like 2019 going into very, very early 2020 was when we started working at the agency with some artists who had, you know, these larger fan bases and had a degree of household name recognition, where all of a sudden the capability of selling merch, products, making offers to fans at a level that could really drive a lot of revenue became a possibility, where a few email marketing campaigns and some text marketing and some warm audience retargeting ads could make you a ton of money. And then for us, the sort of scales fell from our eyes and we saw like, well, what would happen if we tested this with cold traffic? People who aren't necessarily fans of this artist, but they obviously know who they are. This is a massive band, or this is a massive artist. They have household name recognition. What can we do here? We started to slowly test the waters at the agency. And I'm sharing this to say, like, we kind of had to stumble into our own belief in it a little bit, I remember some of those early campaigns where we were like, all right, we don't know if this is going to work. I remember specifically you and I having a number of conversations to be like, oh, man, me especially, like I'm often the hesitant one between the two of us that's like, oh man, we got to hedge our risk. I'm nervous. There's a lot of downside. Like I get scared, and in a lot of ways we kind of fell into this now what I think is really loud and excited and dig my heels in sort of belief. And this is where so much money is left on the table. And it's so underutilized.
Yeah. An anecdote that might illustrate this point for you. If you ask, like, where did Warren Buffett make his money? You might say, like, investing in stocks. And, like, yes, that's true. But the reason that those stocks performed is because they were shares of companies that sold something to an end user. So this is very much relevant to the music industry conversation where it's like, why is an artist successful? Because people bought tickets and they bought, products when that musician's music was in an ad. There were end users involved. So for Warren Buffett, it's actually, he made his money off of people buying Coca-Cola and buying Apple products. Like if you look at the majority of his wealth, it's from that. And so where did George Lucas make his money? Do you know?
No.
So one might presume like, well, he made Star Wars, right? So movie tickets, people bought movie tickets and they bought DVDs. It's like, no, not really actually, because the studio, like he was such an unproven filmmaker at the time that the studio gets a lion's share of that money. But what they didn't factor in was the merchandising.
Merchandise, yeah.
He has always had all the merchandising rights to Star Wars and he made his money off action figures.
Yeah, makes sense. It's right there in plain sight. I have a lightsaber to the right of me, by the way.
He made his money off of you buying a lightsaber. Exactly. And so that's the thing is like, it's a very directly relevant analogy because you have an IP that gets a outsized fan base, a whole shitload of attention and people who adore this brand. And the money that the creator made was all from individual product sales, commerce that's unrelated to the movie or the music in our case, right? So that's why we kind of see it as like the biggest opportunities because these people don't believe that people will want to buy. The studios didn't believe that people would want to buy the Boba Fett action figure. And so they let him have the rights. The same thing's happening in the music industry. Managers, label execs, they do not believe that people are going to want the Lil Wayne backpack. And so they largely don't care. In some cases with superstars where they know it's going to ship, they do care. And we know that.
I think Taylor Swift's team is a really good example of this.
Yeah. Justin Bieber's trademark registration shows you everything you need to know about this.
Right. Exactly. No, I think those are great anecdotes and really good points for sure. It really shows, well, two things. Like it shows that the music industry is kind of behind, which isn't surprising. But also looking ahead, it doesn't really feel like from a macro, totally zoomed out level that things are going any closer in that direction or getting any better. So I'm going to just be here continuing to shout this until everyone in the world is listening. That's my purpose,
Yeah, I would say that the opportunity is so great that it not only applies to artists with a huge following in the hundreds of thousands or millions, but the same exists in a toy model at much smaller followings. The only problem is that you as an artist or your manager as a manager or your label as a label doesn't truly believe that that's the case.
Here's the lie, gang. And this is going to be more digging our heels in a little bit. And I don't think I've ever said this so clearly as I'm going to say it on today's show. But the lie that's being perpetuated, and you'll see it in ads, and you'll see it on websites, and you'll see it on YouTube. The lie is that you can somehow magically, if you just spend enough, if you just work hard enough, you can magically claw your way to a profitable music business by spending on paid social ads to send people to streaming websites, to send people to Spotify, Apple Music, whatever it might be. The lie is that you'll somehow be profitable from that someday. And I'm here to say that that's a lie, because for the vast, vast, vast majority, without a viral moment or without some kind of ridiculous capital backing, you won't. You won't do that. And that's the lie that's being perpetuated. And I'm tired of pretending like it's not a lie.
Yeah, I know and have spoken with over 10,000 musicians, at least, directly. And I only know personally 2 artists who make a significant amount of money off of their streaming check and who also use ads to grow their streaming. So that tells you that the likelihood that you are 2 out of 10,000 is insanely low. But also, there were tons of other things they were doing, right? A lot of other things. And they have other revenue streams. And so even for those 2 in 10,000 plus, it's still not 100% true that they could just run ads and build up their streaming until they were making a significant amount of money.
It breaks my heart so often, the conversations that I have with artists who I'm either consulting with or giving some coaching to or talking with that are interested in IndieX, which in these cases usually end up being more like coaching calls anyway, where the conversation or the question that comes to me is, well, like, how much do you think I need to spend to get X number of monthly listeners? And I'm looking at anything else that they're doing, and it's just like, man, you're asking the wrong questions, and it's not your fault. And that's the thing that kills me, absolutely crushes me. But it's true. You're asking the wrong questions, because I know what you're thinking in your head and you're not saying is like, how much can I spend in order to get to this number, which should net me this number in cash? And it's not a one-to-one relationship like that. It's just not.
Yeah. Streaming is not, there's going to be some eye rolls here, but like streaming is not helpful for artists in the way that you think it is. It is not the new monetization vehicle after CDs. It is just a very organized way, basically, to give away music for free. How do I know? Spotify doesn't make a profit. And a lion's share of the artists who represent the total streaming time spent on Spotify do not make a profit on their music career, and they don't make a living. So if none of the participants are making a living except for the people who locked up and hoarded the IP, the labels and publishers, they make a fair amount of money. No one else does. Not even the company who makes the app. So what that will tell you is that streaming is not the answer to the music industry's problem and to the artist problem. That's just facts.
E-commerce is no.
Yeah, no. I mean, literally, it is finding another way to take this attention that cares enough to stream your music and likes it that much and figuring out a different way to monetize them than the streaming itself. What is streaming? It's a viable, organized alternative to piracy that at least pays for itself.
Ooh, you're definitely going to get some eye rolls and some angry reacts from that one, friend.
It's just making things so convenient that people won't wholesale steal your music. That's all it is. Because like, if I steal your music, I got to organize it all. I got to store it locally. I got to do all this stuff. Spotify's in the cloud. It's organized. It's algorithmic. It makes it so much easier that I would rather pay $10 than steal it all.
Dude, I'll level with you here. At a time where I pirated some music, I didn't anymore once Spotify came out.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And YouTube is the same thing.
Yep.
YouTube Music. So just to say that, like, if you are looking at what is essentially a break-even attempt to stop piracy as your future livelihood, I don't think that's a good setup. And you might be thinking like, but all these people make like tons of money off of Spotify. What you're seeing is the success stories, because you might say like, all right, what's the likelihood that should you always wear a rubber suit because of the risk that you're going to get struck by lightning? No.
You haven't seen my closet, dude. Okay.
Because the likelihood of you getting struck by lightning is so insanely low, it's not even worth talking about or worrying about. Same thing here. You shouldn't focus on that cohort who is making significant money off of Spotify, because the likelihood of you ending up there is so insanely low that it's almost not worth talking about. But you don't see that. You don't see the million plus artists who never got one stream. You don't see all the failures, so you don't know the whole set out of which that success comes. So you don't know the likelihood. And that's really the cognitive bias or dissonance that arises. And so, it's important to point that out because you very well may be the one in, 100,000 who is going to make a nice streaming check. But chances are by the time you do that, you'll be making nicer checks elsewhere.
Yeah. Well said. I think that's a really good primer on, I don't even want to say it's a stance or a position on streaming because it's not. Like, this isn't about us. This isn't about trying to even really teach you something. It's just about how do you think about the opportunities in front of you as an artist these days, right? How do you contextualize them? How do you prioritize them? That's what this is about.
Yeah, Andy Hunter, IndieX strategist and indie founder coach, and lead guitarist of the band As December Falls, they're doing great. They're on festival stages. They are in a high tier of the UK rock scene, even the global rock scene. If you look at all the artists of a similar size, if you measure it by like album equivalent units sold, because maybe they're doing really well on streaming, whereas As December Falls, they sell records. So if you apples to apples compare, you'll get a list of artists who are their peers, right? They're as big as them, but do they all make the same money? Not at all.
No.
Not at all. As December Falls streaming, if you looked at it, you would be like, this artist is not that big. And you're right, they're not that big on Spotify, but they actually make the most money take home out of all their peers. So there's artists who are way bigger on streaming, way bigger on press, but don't have any money. And that's just like the nature of the beast. It should illustrate this point we're making, is that like the artist who wins is the one who actually knows how to monetize that attention better, not get the most attention.
Yeah, it comes back to something we've said on this show before, something that we've said about marketing in general. It's a digital marketing principle about, whoever can spend the most to acquire a customer, aka start making some money, wins. And if you're trying to acquire customers that pay you, fractions of a penny via streaming, then you can't spend that much and you can't make that much.
It's important to point out that like the mechanism for why that's true is not that you will spend so much on advertising that they won't be able to afford it because you're going to drive up the costs, or you're going to buy out every bus bench ad in the city and they won't be able to put one because like record labels do buy bus bench ads. But like, that's not what it is. It's not about competition crowding you out of where you might get in front of people. It's actually about that plus everything else you can do that costs money to make a better customer experience. So for instance, if Taylor Swift can spend millions of dollars creating a stage set, it's going to be more impressive and more attractive to fans of her relevant like space than someone who can't do that. So she might not be spending more on ads. She might be spending more on product. She might be spending more on free offers that get people into her world. So where you spend that money, it varies. And a lot of times the sneaky way it happens is they just have a better product because they can afford to have a better product because they can monetize customers better.
Yeah, that's so true. You're not just spending on promotion. You're spending on product. You're spending on people. Sometimes you're spending on just building up the right kind of people around your team too.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're not just giving them percentages of your business. Maybe you're actually just paying them a salary, like a normal business does.
Yeah. To put it really plainly, it's like if you can sell a product for $1 and get some customers, but I can sell the same product for $1, and when they buy, I will give them $10 back. I'm going to get all your customers. It's not an ad thing. It's not a attention thing. It's just a way better offer. Like no one's going to buy your product if I'm selling the same thing, plus I'll give you a $10 bill. That's not going to happen. So it's a lot about product. And so that's why it's true that those who can afford to spend the most to acquire a customer or even service a customer are going to win.
That's a really nice expansion of that principle, I think. I really like that.
Yeah. It makes it pretty plain English. So it's just to say that the bar is set insanely low in the music industry for what a customer is worth and thereby what can be spent to acquire them. Record labels And managers of big artists, they don't have like good fan records. They don't have good customer records. It's all disparate. It's not something they're focused on.
Right.
And that's the big opportunity for any artist coming up in the music industry, is that you could just do the bare minimum in terms of what most businesses do and be actually outperforming like everybody.
That's the best part.
Yeah.
That's where the opportunity lies, the true arbitrage.
Yeah, for real.
I hope you guys dug these truths and unpacking this lie as well. These are kind of the things that rattle around in my brain and keep me up at night. Thanks for unpacking them with me, Cirque. This was a lot of fun.
Very fun. Yeah. And we'll be back next week, guys. Hey, do me a favor. If you listened all the way through this, if you leave reviews, it pushes us up in podcast algorithm rankings. And we want to get the podcast out to more people. And so if you dig the podcast, you listen to it on a weekly basis, haven't ever left us a review, just go to iTunes or Spotify and just leave us a review and let other people know how you feel about Creative Juice. It would help us out a lot.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Thank you guys so much for always being here with us every week. We love you. We love sharing these things with you, and we'll be back next week with more Creative Juice. Until next time, we'll see you guys then. And as we're wrapping up here, you're listening to Sam Buckingham. This is Something More. She's one of our Indie Awards winners. This is a fantastic song. If you want to be in the running for Indie Awards next year, join us inside Indie Pro. Check out Sam's music. We'll see you guys next time. Peace out.
I believe there's something more. I'll take it and I'll give it all. I will not apologize for taking up space. I'm hungry and I'm not ashamed. I will not be silenced or blamed for demanding. I get a say for demanding. I get my pay. I believe in something more. I can't unsee what I saw. Keep stripping back until I'm raw. Keep stripping back until I'm raw. I believe in something more. 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 I believe in something more.